Okay, let's get started with the panel. I guess we'll go down the line. Everyone kind of introduce themselves and talk a little bit about the firm, and then we'll get to some questions.
I'm Gene Massey. I'm with MediaShares.com. MediaShares has a proprietary technology for doing equity investments. We use a process called direct registration. Our system was developed developed to do an IPO using crowdfunding, to be able to sell single shares in a fully registered IPO. When the new crowdfunding models are developed, they're going to need to have some sort of SEC compliant way to do the transaction, to do the record keeping of the shareholders, to be able to do an ACH checking account debit so that you don't have to open a brokerage account in order to buy a small increment of shares. We've been working with Tonio De Sorrento from Oric, an attorney who specializes in crowdfunding in Washington, D.C. He's here today. We've been working for a number of years to develop this process, and we are very excited about it.
Great, thanks, Gene. I guess we'll start with the first question for you, actually. I recently wrote an article talking about how Facebook's IPO could transform the capital markets, which is also in your the brochure, the event programs, in which you were quoted. So, why don't you talk a little bit about sort of what really direct registration is, and how it will enhance crowdfunding platforms and how it will change things?
Well, it's really the only way to do crowdfunding is in either direct registration or some form of it, because ordinarily to buy shares you have to open a brokerage account and fund the account, and you have to buy a considerable number of shares and pay a $10 transaction fee, and that makes it very difficult to buy a single share in something. With direct registration, you actually allow the company to sell its shares directly, and a funder, an investor, can buy one share directly from the company, and the shares are held in book entry form on the books of the transfer agent, and the transaction is paid for by an ACH checking account debit for the exact amount of the purchase. So that enables a person to buy as little as a single share in something. Now, if Facebook, usually when you do an IPO, a company like Facebook will sell a certain number of shares to an underwriter, and then they in turn sell those shares through their brokers on the phone to the investors. Well, we think that's like going door to door with vacuum cleaners. There is something now called the internet, and you can do everything online. Direct registration would allow Facebook to sell their shares directly to the public, even without an underwriter. And I think Facebook's aware of this. They've even said something to the effect that they've written their own prospectus. They would, if Facebook were to use direct registration and sell their shares directly to the public and allow them to purchase it with an ACH checking account debit, they would then Facebook already knows what you like, and so then they would have your payment information, they would know how much you make, they know your Social Security number, they know where you live. Mm-hmm. They would be the behemoth of all time if they decided to take their 200 million shareholders, 200 million users, and turn them into shareholders, investors. It could be quite an interesting thing. But even more importantly, usually when you sell your shares to the broker, you don't know who your shareholders are. Yes, you can get a NOBO, a non-objecting beneficial owners list, and be able to mail them something later, but Facebook would have direct contact with their shareholders, which they will not have if they go through an underwriter.
Great, thanks.